Welcome to the Soulful CXO. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Wynn. Please take a moment and like, subscribe, and share the show. We are so pleased to have us today, Dr. Dustin Sachs. Dustin is the Chief Technologist and Senior Director of Programs at CyberRisk Alliance. His passion for knowledge drives his leadership in securing critical infrastructure against digital threats. He focuses on strategic foresight and meticulously attention to detail to ensure proactive risk mitigation and defense strengthening. Previously, Dustin held leadership roles at World Connect, Performance Food Group, and Centerpoint Energy. Frequent speaker at major industrial events, and is an adjunct professor at Lone Star College. Dustin, my friend, it's so great seeing you again. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You have an interesting background. One, I believe you started in forensics, and then you became a chief technologist, and people might not even know what a chief technologist is. So can you explain to us that journey and how you got into this fabulous world?
Yeah, absolutely. And it even goes further back from that. I actually got my undergraduate degree in political science and did a year of law school. I got through the first year of law school in the early 2000s and said, when you get to the end of the first year, they start asking you, what do you want to specialize in? What do you want to do? And I was really interested in computers and law and how they intersect. And, I kind of said, well, what are my options? I can go work for the ACLU. I can go work as a government lawyer. And I'm like, but I really want to have money and, actually be able to move out of my parents' house. So that's probably not going to work. And it was really interesting was my dad, who was a forensic accountant at the time, had just interviewed somebody who was talking about this field of computer forensics. And this was pre-iPhone. So it was really desktops and laptops and servers that was it. So I was like, this sounds really interesting, and was very fortunate. I was living in Miami at the time, and there were at the time 4 universities that had university level, graduate level programs. And one of them happened to be in Orlando at the University of Central Florida. So I went through the program, found that this was really my calling, and started out doing e-discovery and digital forensics, really kind of got into it mid 2000s, and was fortunate that we had the economic downturn in 2008, and we had a bunch of people who were leaving companies or being let go from companies that took data with them because they had been there for 20, 30 years, and they walked out with data. So I got to learn how to investigate internal theft or trade secrets, got to end up becoming a testifying expert, testify at state, federal, local levels, in courtrooms. And then kind of as that started to happen, we shifted towards this idea of incident response and cybersecurity becoming a real big thing, and got to worked for a couple consulting firms that had large incident response teams, and was able to work on some very big incident response matters, and really found that I enjoyed that. I enjoyed solving puzzles. I enjoyed the investigative side of things. After doing that for a while, really kind of started to realize that I could have a whole lot more impact if I actually worked at a company and could help them internally build their cybersecurity or digital forensics and really strengthen themselves from the inside. So went and worked for Centerpoint Energy, started out working in their cybersecurity operations center, then moved over to the GRC team, the governance, risk, and compliance team, and really the security, got a knowledge of the security management side of things, and then moved on to other organizations where I was charged with really getting to build from the ground or mature an existing program, security management program. And that led to several years of really working hand in hand with chief information security officers, and then was approached to come work at CyberRisk Alliance and really help impact and educate and create resources for CISOs and senior security leaders to do their job better.
I'm always like, how are you getting around the systems? How are you doing from a social engineering perspective? How are you getting information very easily out of the company? And I tell people, I find behavioral science, social sciences, and cybersecurity really align very well in that we should be better educated in those three together.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my first managers would regularly tell me when I was doing a forensic investigation, he'd ask, how would you do it? If you were going to do it, how would you do it? And then go look and see if the evidence is there. It's always, to me, I've always been fascinated with psychology and the way in which the human brain works and how we as humans why we do the things we do, how we make the decisions we make. And I found very much that as I've progressed in my cybersecurity career, it's always been about understanding why the human is doing what they're doing, why the person is acting the way they do, why do they click the link, why are they trying to take the data, what is their motivation, and then really looking at how do we make the decisions that we make about risk and how do we assess risk as individuals, because every decision we make in cybersecurity, everything we're looking at is always, what is the risk to my organization, or what is the risk of that could come from this event happening? What's the threat? And I feel like if we try to understand it in a vacuum and we try to look at it as a very binary thing, we're missing some of the key elements, and we're missing some of the best ways to protect people. For as long as I've been in the industry, we've talked repeatedly about don't write down your passwords. Make sure your passwords are secure. But what NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and other kind of industry guidance finally got caught up to was this idea that we make people change their passwords all the time is really dumb, because the fact that if I force you to change your password every 90 days, you're going to rotate the password a little bit. You're going to add a character, or you're going to make it something else that's easy to remember. So, approach it from how can I make my policy work for the individual, as opposed to how do you make the individual follow your policy. I've created a policy based on understanding how you're going to act and what's going to motivate you or what's going to deter you, instead of trying to make you follow my rule.
That's where I think the disservice has been from policies and procedures. I have companies who ping out to me very quickly and they're saying, hey, we're trying to get the $60 million deal and we don't have AI acceptable use and how we're going to train it. Can you write one up real quick? I'm like, of course I can write one up real quick, but that's not going to be worth the piece of paper that it's on. It's, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish that you want this piece of paper solely to get that deal? How are you going to mitigate that risk when you do have an issue because of that? Then they found out that you falsified on the contract, and then you're going to deal with those repercussions. Or do you want to go ahead and say the reason we want this in place is we want our people to be able to think about what they're doing, why are they doing it? Is there another way to go ahead and get it accomplished? That's one of the things that I see is we want this solely to get this, and not why is the underlying reasons that we're doing things.
When you talk about the, AI, that's a really great one, because my first question is, well, how are your users, what are your users using AI for? Because if you're writing an AI policy, but everybody in your organization is just using the AI to generate a more coherent email, or to automate their processes, or for to understand a topic. One of the greatest things that I've found for AI, for example, is to say, explain to me this concept. I wonder how I would explain the OSI model, the model of technology, to somebody who's in kindergarten. And I put that into AI and said, hey, explain this to me like I'm 5. And it came back with this really great example of, hey, you want to make a cake with different layers, and each layer is flavored differently, but you want the cake to taste really good at the end. So, and it was great. It was like I could turn to my 12-year-old son and give this to him, and he'd understand generally the concept of what we were talking about. That's a great use, and if your people are doing that, why do you want to stop them from doing that? If they're doing their job more efficiently, do you really want to be so prescriptive that you stop them from doing that? everybody fears AI and says, oh my God, I don't want AI making decisions for me. However, when I pose the question of, do you want your doctor determining what disease or looking at your symptoms that you come in with and saying, I'm only going to make my judgment on what you might have based on my own knowledge, my own education, and what I can research? Or do you want to go to an AI and say, hey, look at the whole breadth of medical information that's out there, and in a few minutes, here are my symptoms. What are the most likely things? And have your doctor then making some strategic decisions that way. And most people go, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. The one that was mind-boggling to me is there was a research done, I think it was a year or two ago, where they were able to take x-rays of lung cancer victims up in the Massachusetts, Boston area, and they put the x-rays through AI, and AI was able to identify with like 85 to 90% accuracy instances of lung cancer 6 or 7 years prior to when the doctor identified it. And now you're talking about saving lives by using AI instead of the doctor or the radiologist having to kind of use their judgments. So there are really good uses for AI. And I feel like we've taken at times this idea of the policy has to be black and white, one way or the other. And that's a very dangerous thing. That's why looking at it from that human element and how does it impact humans is a really important thing.
It's interesting because when we talk about technology, I mean, AI has been around since 1950. Machine learning has been around since 1960. We've been correlating data for a very long time. We can do a lot more efficiently now. And the one thing I do like about, I'll call it AI 2.0, for lack of a better term right now, next gen AI, is the correlation of data. And I think the workflow analysis and process improvement is something that has been lacking in technology. At least, I mean, maybe you would say that development might have had that with all the scrums and stuff like that they've had. But generally speaking, from a cybersecurity perspective, we haven't had that as much. And that's the one thing that I see that we can like say, here's this workflow and it's hicking up for some reason. Can you give me some reasons that you might see that could be hicking it up? You still have to do the mental analysis. I think people who go ahead and say, it just said this, therefore I'm gonna run with it, and not taking the human critical thinking, that's always the danger point. But we can be using it a lot more respectfully, I think, in cybersecurity.
I mean, we saw what happens when you blindly take what the results come from an AI in New York with the lawyer who filed the legal brief and basically said, file the legal brief or write a legal brief and give me all the citations. And the AI did what it was supposed to. It gave a citation. It was not programmed to give an accurate citation, just to give a citation. It made it up. It did what it needed to do. So it achieved its mission, but it was false. And the guy sends it in and, the other attorneys go, this is crap. We can't find these. And, to your point as well, I mean, the efficiencies, I've had numerous CISOs, including the CISO I worked for at World Connect, who would say, whenever they were asked the question, is AI going to take my job? The answer was always, AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. And I think that's the value of it in what you were saying, the workflows. If you can make yourself 10% more efficient or even 1% more efficient, I think of Andy Ellis's book, 1% Leadership, or nudge theory. If you can make yourself 1% more efficient each day using AI, you're going to make yourself really efficient in a year. And now all of a sudden you're able to do the things that are otherwise mundane and not that creative and not that fun. And you can now focus on the fun stuff.
I think another part, just because we're talking about CISO burnout is big. And I'll be honest, I've been massively burned out before. Boku hours, understaffed, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the one thing is that when you go ahead and we can look at some of these efficiencies, sometimes we can go ahead and we can see, how can I stack those activities to take less time. And I think one of the things that we have to be careful about, let's say we were working a 60-hour work week and we use some of these tools and AIs to allow us to be able to work a 45-hour work week efficiently, fight tooth and nail that those other 15 hours don't get eaten up again by work. Instead, they need to be, I think, really eaten up by work-life balance. And I think that it helps people then, how can I have a better work culture? How can I have gratitude that I work for the place that I work for? And how can they have gratitude for me because they're getting my best self too, and allow me to be able to flow better? Is that what you see too? I think that's the critical part. If we allow AI to help us become super efficient and then we're still just doubling our hours, that's the one thing that worries me.
I think it goes beyond AI. I mean, you and I are talking to each other, post COVID, and I haven't stepped foot full time in an office since then. I live just west of Houston. It is a 30-mile drive to downtown Houston, which is where I worked for 5.5 years. I would spend on average each way to work 2 hours in the car. Each way. So 4 hours of my day alone was spent in the car on a good day. More on other days. I mean, my wife and I joke, we got an Audible account because of this, because I was just in the car so much. That time that I've gotten back since COVID, the fact that I don't drive 2 hours in the car, that's massive. That to me is vital. And I think what we've found is that not only in COVID, but then you add in AI is exactly the problem that you're running into. You hear people who say, well, but I work more now than I did before COVID because I'm at home and I can work till 6:30 and it's no big deal because I'm just going to get up and go eat dinner. I think we've got to be very careful. That is the danger of working remote, but so it's a blessing and a curse. And I think in order for us to really combat burnout, we've got to understand that even though maybe the paradigm of the line between work life maybe has blurred a bit more over the last couple of years, we've still got to keep that really very distinct line of like, I've put in my time and I'm walking away. And as cybersecurity professionals, we've got to be better about that, because everyone knows if you're in an operational role, you might be working weekends and holidays. And, after the CrowdStrike incident where, it happened on a Friday, people had to work over the weekend. But you also know that you would also hope that those organizations recognize that and say, hey, you know what? Take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and, don't come in. Like, no big deal. Like, take a longer weekend, take a couple days, or, hey, you want to leave a little early today, sign off, go do it. I don't think we see enough of that. And I think we need to see more of it. We need to continue to foster that because it's so vital.
Yeah, I've had an issue always with HRs, because they don't always understand that from a technology perspective. I think they're better now post-COVID,
Yeah.
where you've got to work your 40 hours. I would call them wink, wink days. Said, was Dustin there? Yeah, wink, wink. Yeah, Dustin was there this week's in.
And how many organizations, once it hits lunchtime Friday, are kind of like the wink, wink, like you say, where it's like, if you can convince people not to schedule meetings for you on Friday afternoon, you kind of start your weekend a little early. I mean, everybody kind of does it. And it was always one of those, like, everyone did it, but no one talked about it. And it's still very much everyone does it, but nobody talks about it. But I think it should be less of a stigma behind it and more of if you're coming in and doing your work and putting in your effort and delivering, and you can do that in 30 hours, guess what? You get 10 free hours of paid time off because you got what you needed done in the week done. You're meeting your deadlines. And if you can do it in 30 hours, what normally takes 40, you're just being efficient. And we should reward that efficiency.
Exactly. Don't penalize me, or they want to pay me less. That, you need to only work 30 hours a week instead, so we will pay you less. I'm like, there's a premium on efficiency that I think that is missing in the marketplace.
And the organization won't hesitate to say, well, we need you to work 50 hours, but we're going to pay you the same amount. They're not going to pay you more for working a 60-hour week, But the minute you say, oh, well, I was able to get done in 30 hours what took 40 hours, they go, well, okay, well, we're not going to pay you for a full 40 hours. Like we don't need to pay you the same. You can't have it one way and not have it the other way. If I'm efficient, and there's not a need, cool. Like this idea that you have to work 80 hours every 2 weeks and that it's got to be 8 every day isn't the reality of cybersecurity. If you work a 12-hour day one day, you work a 6-hour day the next day, and that's okay.
Or you're in wasteful meetings for 8 hours a day, and then you got 4 hours after that to try and get your work done.
Yeah, I mean, so the reality is, I think there needs to be a real the way that we're going to combat a lot of this burnout, not only just at the CISO level, but at all levels, is trusting people, remembering that we're not talking about children in elementary school. We're all grown adults. And if if your hiring practices are to hire people who are less than reliable, look at your hiring practices, not at the people that are in the organization. Your policies are the problem, not the people that you're hiring. They're just doing what they're, programmed to do. But on the same side, if you're hiring good people that you trust and you truly trust them, then let them manage their schedules, because they're going to be more happy. And we've seen over and over psychologically, a worker is going to be more willing to put in the effort and do the work when they know they're being treated with a level of respect and trust that they want. So if you give your people the freedom, you'll actually find that they'll be more willing to do the work, because they'll be more loyal to you, because they know that they're getting treated really, really well. They're getting a sweet deal, and they don't want to abuse that because they don't want to risk losing that.
Isn't part of the problem is we're not doing a very good job of embracing neurodiversity in the workplace, especially in cybersecurity?
Absolutely. As somebody who has struggled with neurodiversity issues for years and for my entire life, I think it's interesting because I've had this discussion as well. I'm on the local board here in Houston of Autism Speaks. Autism is a neurodiversity that is very personal to me. And it's interesting because if you asked cybersecurity hiring managers, CISOs and senior leaders, what are the characteristics you're looking for in your ideal worker? Attention to detail, ability to spot patterns, a drive and a focus on the industry you're in, a willingness to learn, all of the things that you would go, man, if you've got all those, you're a unicorn. That's what neurodiverse people typically have. Those are the characteristics of those people. Some of the people that I know in the industry that are some of the best, and some of the people who every one of us looks up to, are neurodiverse. It's an area, it's what makes us good in technology. It's what makes us good in cybersecurity. So why aren't we embracing that? Why aren't we embracing the fact that you don't have to be the company man or woman that was the picture in Mad Men in the 1950s and 60s? Like, there are reasons why those mentalities have long fallen away, and why we look at that and go, that's an era that we don't want to go back to. I think anytime you're excluding people who have a passion for things, you're missing out. And to sit there and go, well, you don't interact with the world the same way, or your people skills aren't. I mean, there are plenty of roles that you can have in cybersecurity where, quite honestly, and unfortunately, crudely, you don't need to have people skills. A SOC analyst doesn't necessarily need to have people skills. You need to be able to look at patterns. You need to be able to analyze. You need to be able to run down rabbit holes, all of that. Certainly, people skills are going to differentiate you, but if you don't want to interact with the world, there are jobs that's okay. You're going to be amazing. Not everyone's got to be the one who wants to get on a podcast or be a speaker, or, get up and present. Some of us enjoy doing that. Some of us like educating others about it. Some of us interact with the world in a way that we're able to turn it on when it comes to cybersecurity. I am the biggest introvert of all when the camera is off and the end of the day comes. When I'm in my role in cybersecurity, I'm game on. You would never know that I'm an introvert because I'm in a comfort zone and because I'm able to pursue my passion and be around people who are equally passionate. But I think it's also about authenticity and owning your narrative and not being ashamed of it.
When you encourage people to be their authentic self, being able to follow their flow, you can help teach them some emotional intelligence skills, because a lot of people who are highly intelligent, we just see things and think of things differently. But if you lead with an emotional intelligence and that's the only thing you're looking for in an interview, I think you miss out on some really top candidates over and over again.
Some of the best leaders that I've experienced in my career are those who, by all outward accounts, lacked emotional intelligence because of the persona that we expect from a leader. You know, even when you look at some of the top leaders out there, the people who everyone turns to and puts as a leader, if you really look at them, they're people who don't fit the mold of the perfect leader. Steve Jobs, by all accounts, was a horribly harsh person to the people he worked with.
Elon Musk,
by all accounts, is a horrible person to the people that they work with. But we look at them and we go, that's a leader, because they've got this skill, this ability to motivate us to do things. I mean, you look at those people and you go, you know what? Yeah, you might not have people skills, but you're a leader because you've got this characteristic that nobody else does. For all their flaws, they're outside the box thinkers. I think back to the Apple commercial, the Think Differently commercial. If you remember that commercial, it was, it was the quote from, I believe I think it's Picasso who did the original quote, which was, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are usually the ones that do. And that quote, to me, that think differently concept really embodies what we look for when we look for leaders. We're looking for somebody who's going to look at the world differently and go, I'm willing to do what people don't think is possible. One of, by all accounts, the most motivational presidents of all time, John F. Kennedy, stood up in 1961 and said, we're going to go to the moon before the end of this decade, at a point when we knew zero, literally zero, about how we were going to do it. And everybody said, oh my God, you're crazy. We're never going to be able to pull that off. And we did. And it's because people said, you know what? If he's crazy enough to think we can do it, maybe we can do it.
Unfortunately, our time has totally flown by. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this episode. Please make sure, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share the show. Please go ahead and subscribe to the Soulful CXO Insights newsletter that's available on LinkedIn. Dustin, thank you so much for sharing your insights and being on the show. It was awesome having you here today.
Absolutely. It was great to be here. And I would encourage everybody to go listen to Dr. Wynn's previous episodes. For my name to be in that same category of people now who have been guests here, that's just amazing to me.